Call the City Commission meeting for Thursday, April 6th, 2023, here in Commission Chambers, Municipal and Safety Building open. First, we have the invocation by Joel Bean from the Sanctuary. If you will stand for that and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mayor Fowler, Vice Mayor Murphy, City Commissioners, and City Leaders, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's my desire to bring blessings upon this city that we love and cherish so much. I ask you to join with me and bow your heads as we pray. Father, we come before you today. We want to thank you for you have given everything that pertains to life and godliness. You have provided us blessings. You have given us the pleasure and the privilege of living in the greatest region and the greatest city in the United States, and I want to thank you for that. I thank you for these city leaders who are giving their livelihoods to serve our city for the benefit of those who live here. I thank you for your protection upon us today. I come before you, and I pray, first of all, in the name of Jesus, that you would give us wisdom. Give wisdom to each one of these leaders. Let wise and right decisions be made. I pray that there would be a sense of righteousness and justice that would be the cornerstone of every decision that is made. I pray, O God, for there to be peace and unity. Let unity prevail, for when we are divided, we fall, but when we are united, we stand. And I pray that there would be unity in our city and unity in these decisions. And I pray, O God, that there would be peace and joy, that we would serve this city and serve you with joy in our hearts. I pray for the agenda laid before us today, that the right decisions would be made, that the right direction would go for this city, for this commission, and for our lives. I pray your blessings upon this city. I pray for you to cover this city with your peace, with your love, and with your joy. We depend on you for life and for salvation, and we come before you today and pray that you would grant this to us. And I ask all of this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Trivett.
Commissioners, your first
meeting with us doing this.
First meeting on this side of this. Your first order of business is to consider the approval of the minutes for the regularly scheduled City Commission meeting held on Thursday, March the 23rd, 2023.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Laus.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Abstain, I was not in attendance.
What?
Abstained.
He wasn't here, so.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Your next order of business is 4.1 on the agenda, presentation of proclamation recognizing April 2023 as Donate Life Month.
Glad to have you here. I'm glad to be here, and I'll let you speak after this. Okay. Great. Are we going back there? I'll try one more time. Go ahead. Whereas Tennessee Donor Services is a Donate Life agency and nonprofit organization dedicated to saving and improving lives through organ, eye, and tissue donation throughout Tennessee, and is one of 57 organ procurement organizations throughout the nation. And whereas each organ donor hero can give the gift of life to 8 people, and each tissue donor can improve another 75 lives, and whereas more than 100,000 American men, women, and children, 3,000 of whom are Tennesseans, are waiting for life-saving organ transplants. And whereas the most effective way
So I'm Nick Shepard, I'm External Affairs Coordinator with Tennessee Donor Services. And our mission is simple. I wake up every day thinking about how can I save more lives. And my role is to, raise awareness, do public education, talk to folks like you all. And because there is a great need, like you said, more than 100,000 people are currently on the waiting list across the country, including 3,000 here in Tennessee. We have great volunteers right here from Johnson City who received a liver transplant. One man waited 12 years to get a heart transplant, and they come out and they volunteer with us and they tell their story. So I would just encourage all of you this month to think about donation. If you're not registered, please consider it. Please talk with your family and friends about it. And it's a very personal decision, but I would hope you would sign up to be registered and just help us save lives. And so maybe at one point in the far, far future, you can be a hero for somebody else. Thank you all so much for the proclamation. Thank you for letting me speak, Mayor. And best of luck. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your next presentation is a proclamation recognizing April 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
That may be better. Welcome. Whereas nationally, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience some sort of sexual assault in their lifetime, and whereas the problems of sexual violence are not confined to any one group of people, but cross all economic, racial, gender, educational, religious, and societal barriers, and is sustained by societal indifference, and whereas victims of sexual violence should have help to find safety, comfort, and compassion that they need, and offenders should be punished to the full extent of the law. And whereas emergency services, counseling, medical and legal professionals, and other supportive services need to be made readily available to victims of sexual violence so that they can escape the cycle of abuse. And whereas we encourage sexual violence victims and their families to seek assistance from inclusive and trauma-informed victim service organizations such as the Johnson City, Washington County Family Justice Center. And whereas there is compelling evidence that we can be successful in reducing sexual violence through preventative education, increased awareness, and holding perpetrators who commit acts of violence responsible for their actions. And whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month draws annual attention to the fact that sexual violence is widespread and has implications for every community member. And whereas the theme for Sexual Assault Awareness Month is Start by Believing, which encourages every person to start by believing victims of sexual violence, help survivors connect with services, and to speak out against harmful attitudes and actions. And whereas the City of Johnson City has a moral obligation to work to prevent sexual violence as a matter of public health and safety, address its brutal and destructive effect, protect vulnerable members of the local community, and prioritize ending sexual violence. Now, therefore, I, Todd Fowler, Mayor of City of Johnson City, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim April 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Johnson City in recognition of the important work done by the Johnson City, Washington County Family Justice Center and all sexual service providers. Furthermore, I urge all citizens, agencies, and businesses to work together in our community through prevention, intervention, and education programs to support those who are working to eliminate sexual violence in our community and to make a personal commitment to make Johnson City a violence-free community. There you go. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Would you like to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit?
I'm Star Bradley. I'm the director of the Johnson City, Washington County Family Justice Center. And this is Jennifer Douglas. She's our coordinated community response specialist for the Johnson City Family Justice Center. Sexual Assault Awareness Month is very important because it raises awareness and educate the public about the issues of sexual assault. One of our main goals is to be able to help survivors of sexual assault survivors to help them feel supported and heard and validated. And so we raise awareness of sexual assault each year to make sure that the public is educated and also make sure that perpetrators are held accountable for their crime.
Yes, as she said, I'm Jennifer Douglas, and I'm a CCR specialist at the Johnson City, Washington County Family Justice Center. And we're always thrilled. We've been doing this every year for a few years, and we're always thrilled because This makes the epidemic of sexual assault in our community and in our country actually very visible. So the goal of the Family Justice Center has two main things. Of course, to offer assistance to sexual assault victims, but also we work really hard to change the societal response to sexual assault in this area. We try to keep up with the numbers, and I have a few statistics here I think some of you will find staggering. So a study published last fall in the American Medical Association Journal found that between 2006 and 2019, there was an increase in the number of victims who presented to emergency rooms for sexual assault care by 1,533%. That's a huge number when you think about that. And when you add in the fact that only 21% of sexual assault victims actually visit the emergency room, that number goes up astronomically. As far as locally, in Tennessee, their health report, and the Department of Tennessee's health report in 2020, they stated that 871 occurrences of sexual assault have happened in Northeast Tennessee. Nearly 500 of those were right here in Washington County. So as you can see that the Family Justice Center has a lot of work to do. We as a community have a lot of work to do. So the most important thing that you guys can do as citizens of the community is if someone comes to you and trusts you enough to disclose an assault to you, start by believing. This is also our Start by Believing campaign kickoff month. So that's what we urge you guys to do more than anything else, is if someone musters the strength to put that kind of trust in you, believe them, support them, and let them know that there are people that will help them.
Thank you.
Your next presentation is a proclamation recognizing April the 1st through the 7th, 2023 as Week of the Young Child.
Whereas the first years of a child's life are the period of the most rapid brain development and lay the foundation for all future learning, and whereas children's cognitive, physical, social, and emotional, and language and literacy development are built on a foundation of children's positive interactions with adults, peers, and their environment, and whereas high-quality early childhood education depends on high-quality early childhood educators who ensure that children, supported by families, have the early experiences they need for a strong foundation, and whereas young children need skilled, educated, competent, consistent, and compensated early childhood educators and developmentally appropriate, accessible, and available early care and education settings, and whereas early childhood educators need the ability to earn a family-sustaining wage that is commensurate with the required education and skills they bring to the complex and valuable work they do, and whereas the Strong, Accountable Care Community, Strong ACC, is a coalition of 370-plus partner organizations, including Appalachian Association for Children's Early Education, Appalachian's Promise Alliance, ETSU Center for Excellence in Early Childhood Learning and Development, and Save the Children Action Network, that are Northeast Tennessee, that are working together to improve physical, social, and economic health, especially by building a robust continuum of early care and education from birth to 8 years of age. Now, therefore, I, Todd Fowler, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, do proclaim April 1st through 7th, 2023 as the Week of the Young Child in Johnson City, and urge all members of our community to support efforts that increase children's and families' access to high-quality early childhood education in Johnson City. There you go. Have you introduce yourself? All right.
I'm Ashley Stockton, and I am the Community Action Team Lead for East Tennessee with Save the Children Action Network.
And I'm Heather Logan. I'm a community engagement specialist with the Strong Accountable Care Community that was referred to in the proclamation. We serve Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia with over 370 partner organizations to improve the social, economic, and physical well-being of people in our region. And clearly, a way that we do that is by focusing on young children and their families. And one of the things that we just launched recently is a Bright Start Tennessee plan. We would love to leave one of those with everybody. This is a plan to ultimately raise third grade reading and math proficiency in the region. So you've heard a lot about that in the news lately. And the way to do that is to invest early. Oh, I'll make sure that you get one. Yes.
I'll share.
So we have to start investing early in order for that to happen. And in the Washington County, Johnson City area, we're actually only have capacity for about 38% of children under 6 to be in some type of early care and education environment. So if you add up child care centers, Head Start, pre-K, we're only able to serve about 38% of children under 6. So there's a lot of children that we are not serving, knowing that those early years are incredibly important. So we invite you to celebrate Week of the Young Child with us, and also we invite everybody on April the 26th to join us for a regional child care summit. That will be held at the Bristol train station, where we're going to bring together people from Virginia and Tennessee working to address the child care crisis. And you'll get a personal invitation from me, all the people up here, very shortly tomorrow. So thank you so much for having us and taking time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Your next agenda item is street closure for the 2023 PepsiCo fireworks celebration to be held July the 3rd, 2023. I think Mr. Mark Stone, the General Manager of Freedom Hall, will be speaking on this behalf.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Assistant City Manager. Once again, it is time for the annual fireworks, and once again, on behalf of PepsiCo and Freedom Hall, we would love to have your presence at Freedom Hall for the annual fireworks display. These are the normal street closings that we do every year. They are set forth in the EMS plan and have been approved for normal traffic flow up until a point at which point we close off the streets so that we can gather some folks and shoot some fireworks.
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
We're for fireworks, right?
I think everybody, we're going to find out in just a second. We're going to vote. Ms. Louse, would you come?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes. Would you like to say anything else about this coming up? Because there are people that have missed it in the past, and we're happy that we're doing this.
We can't have that. Always, we do have a wonderful time at the fireworks. We have a current list right now of about 22 food/vendors, and so we're looking forward to a good time. I talked to Parks and Rec today, and we're looking for some additional things from Parks and Rec to hopefully do with children while they were up there too. So a good time should be had by all.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
We'll be there.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Your next order of business is consideration of the consent agenda.
All right, I will start over here. Commissioner Hunter.
I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner Brock.
Yes, I'll pull 2.2.1, Mr. Ross. I mean, 6.2.1 and 6.3.2.
All right. Vice Mayor.
She's pulled the ones that I was interested in, so.
All right.
Great
concur.
minds.
Yes.
There you go. And?
I have nothing to add.
I have nothing to add. How about, I will pull 6.1.8.
Okay, the first one is 6.1.8. John Lane is here with Water Sewer to answer any questions that you all may have.
I'm happy that you're walking all the way up here, but it's more of a comment than a question kind of thing. So the engineers had said this was going to cost about $750,000 to do.
Yes, that's
We got
correct.
We got a bid for 510, somewhere in
Yeah,
that?
almost 513,000 when we
500.
opened bids, which was summer of 2022.
And-
And this is the water tank you kind of see right above the ETSU campus with the E logo
It's
on
got
it.
the big E on it there.
The big E logo
Yeah.
right above the golf portion of the campus. And so we closed the project under budget. It was a little over 15,000 under budget, so.
So not only did we get a bid for $250,000 less than we had estimated. They even came under budget on that savings. So I just appreciate the people we have doing those kind of jobs, because they're not easy jobs, and it came in under budget. So we're saving taxpayer money getting this stuff done, and saving people's water and sewer bills a little bit.
Yes, very much so.
That's why I wanted to pull this.
Yeah.
So thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. The next one that was pulled was 6.2.1, Preston Construction Company, change order number 2. Mr. Brian Ross is here to answer any questions.
Yeah, and this was just, I always like the public to know the kind of work that we're doing in the school system, and you might just kind of give a real brief overview of what this is and what it's doing for Science Hill.
Sure. So this is a proposed change order to the current construction agreement for the science classroom renovations that are going on currently. Excuse me. That current contract includes renovating 2 sets of bathrooms from the gang style to individual use restrooms. There are 2 sets of those currently being done. This change order would also incorporate a 3rd set of restrooms, and these are the set that's off of Grand Topper Hall, which is the newer cafeteria section. So currently, those restrooms are adjacent and actually face the hallway, and school administrators are having a really hard time supervising those restrooms. They've even had to close them occasionally. A lot of it is due to some of these social media challenges that encourage violence and vandalism and those kinds of things. So this comes at the request of school administrators and the superintendent, and this was presented and approved by their board. So the idea is that that style of restroom, the individual use, helps the school supervise the comings and goings in those restrooms.
And the science labs, that was really upgrading the original science labs that
Correct.
were
Some
in
of
the
those-
school in
some of those-
1960.
Most of those rooms that are being renovated are the original
Right.
finishes,
So I
cabinets, and
would've
everything.
Lighted one of the Bunsen burners in there in the 1960s. How many science labs were upgraded?
12, I
12
believe,
of
is the
them.
total.
Okay. Very good.
Mhm.
All right.
And then there was a CDC suite built out of another additional 4 classrooms. I think it's also important to note to you all that ESSER funds paid for the majority of this project, and then the additional cost associated with this change order and change order number 1 that was above the ESSER funds is being paid for by school's fund balance.
Very
So
good.
there are no city funds going toward this project to upgrade that school.
We're glad it's focused in this area. It was much needed on the science labs.
Absolutely so.
Thank you.
Mr. Ross, thank you for coming to share and explain a little bit about this request. In light of school safety, you talked a little bit about the importance of individual restrooms instead of community restrooms. Can you speak more along the lines of safety within the school in terms of how this request will accommodate safety in general?
So it's really what it comes down to, and this is, I'm learning this from conversation with the principal, Dr. Carter. It's really about supervision. When you have the gang-style bathrooms, you could have 10, 15, 20 students in there. They're not comfortable posting an adult in that room with them to supervise this, so they really don't know what activities might be going on. So what this does is, first of all, it opens those restrooms to a foyer to the cafeteria side, so they can see who's going in and out of these individual use restrooms, and prevents any kind of group gathering in those restrooms, and they're much easier to supervise.
Will the same amount of fixtures be accommodated going from the group to individuals?
I believe
or will they be less fixtures?
Yeah, I think we're going from 9 to 7.
Okay.
So not much,
But if they're not able to use the restrooms as they are, then they're, in my mind, in a way, they're gaining use of those restrooms.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ross. The next one that was pulled was 6.3.2, Rydell All-American Sports. This is for the youth football program equipment. We have Coach Carter and also Interim Director April Norris.
I just thought this would be a good time. I know you've ordered the equipment to kind of update. We've had a lot of conversations, and I've talked to parents who have been there to also register and sign up. But how's it going, and what kind of response have you gotten?
Well, the response has been great. First of all, the Parks and Rec has been fantastic in helping us, and April has been outstanding, and the partnership has been really good with our school system.
Put a mic.
Oh, I'm
Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Pull it toward
All
you
right.
there.
He's
Okay.
happier back there, so we're good.
I've got it now, okay. So the Parks and Rec, the relationship has been great. What we've done so far is we went to all 8 elementary schools, and we've had some great responses. Some better at some schools than others, but we've had super response. I think April just pulled it. I think we have 131 registered right now. We think that number will go way up because June 15th is the cutoff date. But we have really, we've answered a lot of questions. Colin has really got the information out for us through the school system, and they've actually put it on the Parks and Rec for all the questions the parents may have. So it looks like right now that we will at least, we think, 3 to 4 schools will have 3 teams, and then we may have to combine some of the other ones. Providence right now, when working with them, they will have a team, and actually they would have to go to Providence, but that will give us 5 to 6 teams is what we're looking at. So all that's going really well right now. A lot of questions still have to be answered as far as not bylaws, but as far as the rules and that stuff. We did have to change our age to fit our middle schools better because we can kind of transition up smoothly. So we went from 11-year-olds to 6-year-olds with 5-year-olds playing up, and that's really helped. And once we looked at it, we started with the 12-year-olds, but that's helped us also. So right now on the equipment, we've got single source, we've got bids in. April can tell you more about that, but we have everything ready to go right now. It's just with your all's approval is what we're looking for.
How's the coach recruitment?
Coach recruitment, we have had a bunch of applications. I don't know if you know exactly how many is in yet. About 15 in now, and it seems like every place we've went, we've had a lot of interest. Now we're going to have to sift through those after we see the numbers. It's kind of, you got to see the numbers before you actually place the coaches, but great responses, and especially, and I'll go ahead and say it, on the Woodland, super response, better than we thought. Fairmont, super response. Lake Ridge, a super response. Town Acres, a good response. A few of the others were we're probably going to have to go back. We have stations at all the rec centers right now, at Carver, at Langston, at the new rec, and for people to come in and register there too.
Coach Carter, thank you for coming to share about the concerning update of this outstanding and exciting program for our community. I understand there's about $121,000 upfront costs for the equipment. What kind of yearly cost associated with equipment can we expect moving forward?
You're looking at the reoccurring would be $7,000 to $8,000. I think that we had in that chart for that would be, and that would only start after the 2nd year, I believe. We have that chart. We look with the reoccurring cost, and I think that's what we would do. We would recondition half of it, and it would be $7,000 or $8,000 a year. Now, that's for 450 helmets. So if we have 300 play, it will not be as much. So only the equipment we use is the ones that we will be doing. And hopefully that'll be all of them, but I think that'll probably take 2 years to be using all the equipment.
All right, thank you. And also, I have a question regarding the program fee for participants. What kind of accommodations are we providing for families in need who are unable to afford the registration fees?
Okay, as we went to all the schools, it's a $50 registration fee, but we do have the scholarship forms, and we've been able to give those to a lot of people. And what they're doing, they're taking a scholarship, they're filling them out. Actually, today I left one for school for a lady to pick up, and what they'll do is take it to the Winged Deer Tower and turn it in for the scholarships.
We already have a fund for scholarships in our league programs.
Yes, we do. We just utilize the same scholarship program that we currently have.
So far, I believe my last count is we probably have about 12 or 13 that have requested scholarship. And we will not have any issues accommodating that, so.
Do we have any concern about those available funds exhausting? Due to, in my line of work, I work with a lot of families in need, and there is a high poverty level in Northeast Tennessee. Do you ever have a concern of those scholarship funds running out?
No, I don't have any concern with that. We try our best to maintain a healthy balance through our foundation, to keep those costs minimal to us. And those donations come in every year. It's just like clockwork. A lot of places, it's just like, this is my annual contribution, and they send their check, and so we have those funds available. And throughout our programs, it's a low percentage of families who ask for those scholarships. And we keep our program costs relatively low. Most of our other athletic programs are around $25. Football, you have to have it up just a little bit higher because there are more equipment costs associated with that. But thus far, I've been pleased with the number of scholarships that we've had and don't have any worries with that.
This is handled through the Parks and Rec Foundation Board?
Yes.
Correct,
Mhm.
right. So it's comes from donations?
Yes, and we'll start our cheer registration that goes along with this program. Those registrations will be starting within the next week, and we've made great strides to make contacts with all of the school systems to get in touch with the ladies who are already running those programs so that we can just kind of pick those up with the same people and maintain those programs. And I believe Mr. Turner had given us the contact of how the cheer team will also be assisting us with our cheer program as well.
That's good.
Do you see any reason why, like Northside and Mountain View are not meeting, registration expectations that you had?
They were our first ones that we went through, and then we had spring break, and it seemed like we had a better turnout after that. That's why we're probably going to go back to those schools. We will go back to those schools.
Okay, good.
And do that and see. And some of them, it's the size of the schools.
Right.
The ones that I listed was our biggest 4 schools.
Yeah.
So that's a lot to do with it. Also, far as we have been contacted with ETSU Health, they want to help cover us at our games for trainers and physicals and help us with physicals. So that's been a great surprise. But you come out and you get these relationships, and that happened from going to one of the schools. So that's going. April also said those registration forms we're getting, and they're in their print shop right now, and they'll go home to every elementary school, boy and girl, for the football and cheer, and I should have those out hopefully by the end of next week.
One last question. You and I talked about this, Coach Carter, I think some time ago. There's going to be some families to Vice Mayor's point, that you're still going to have to buy football shoes and football pants, right? So does the scholarship help with something like that, or would we need to look for some additional funds maybe from some of the football support groups around that are here?
Actually, that is one of the things that had come up through the foundation is I actually have an allotted amount of money that's already set aside at Horton Sports, that I can make the determination of if someone needs that type of equipment, we can utilize those funds for that. So I already have that prepared, and if we exhaust that amount, then I'm sure that we can find those that will be willing to sponsor those things.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if y'all have reached out to them yet, but the Kermit Tipton group
Yeah.
would be a good resource.
Yep.
I know
I've
they'd
already
like
talked
be
to I already talked to Bob about that and about a benevolence, just to give some stuff, and they're excited to help in any way. So I've already reached out to those guys.
I will make one comment. We got the quotes from the 2 different groups that were doing this, and BSN, somebody I know have used in the past, but you were with Riddell, and the prices were a little bit lower even with who we're using, and they guaranteed delivery. So we're getting them for less than we thought we would, BSN doesn't even have helmets, so Riddell was going to be the ones we used anyway. So I thought they did a great job, and 30 free footballs. That sounds pretty good too. So that's a great deal. So we appreciate you reaching out to them and them giving us great prices for that. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you, April.
All right. If nothing further, do I have a motion about
Move
the?
approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Your next order of business is an ordinances, ordinance number 4837-23 for a first reading. An ordinance to abandon an existing sanitary sewer easement located on property owned by the city of Johnson City at tax parcel 054A-B-012 and 054A-B-012.02 and Brummett Development LLC at parcel 054A-B-11.05. We have Mr. John Lane here to
Good evening
address that.
again. I have a very short couple slides to kind of show exactly what we're talking about on this one. All right. Like Mr. Trivett said, this is ordinance 4837-23, first reading. So in the commission packet, you probably see already that this is regarding an existing sanitary sewer easement that we're going through the process to try to abandon based on the request of both the city of Johnson City. There's three different parcels involved, two owned by the city and one owned by Brummett Development LLC. This is actually in regards to when Publix redeveloped at the Food City site, kind of across from Johnson City Med Center right there. They built an access road over to Novus Drive. When that happened, kind of based on the development of that access road, the existing sewer line was not feasible, so they had to relocate and build a new sewer line adjacent to that. So when that happened, we had the new sewer line recorded on the easement for each property, but now this is going through and actually going through the abandonment process of the existing easement that's no longer needed. So you can kind of see here, this is just a quick aerial for everybody's reference. Obviously, this is the Publix property. This is going back to 2016. And then going back and now forward in time to just a couple days ago, you see obviously Novus Drive when it was built, the access road coming off of Publix. And so the area we're talking about is right in here. Right through here, when this access road was built, there is an existing sewer line that kind of feeds through this area that was relocated as part of that project of Publix. And so obviously here is the original easement going through the abandonment in the packet. And then obviously here's the new easement, which is just to the east where that is now.
Move for approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Your next order of business is ordinance 4839-23, first reading. An ordinance to establish Article 17, open space in the City of Johnson City zoning code, and to amend Articles 2 and 4, definitions of terms used in the code, and use requirements by district in order to establish open space requirements and standards. Ms. Payton is up for your questions and comments.
Good evening. Welcome.
Hello, good evening, Commissioners. In front of you, I have consideration for an open space ordinance. That would be 4839-23, and it would introduce Article 14 and make a couple other amendments in the zoning code. So I'm going to kind of take a step back and explain where we started with this process, because this actually began in January of 2022. So planning staff sat down and we noticed some things happening, and we decided that we wanted to create a vision for open space standards. At that point, we worked with the Planning Commission, and by April of '22, we had a purpose and intent statement written. By July of '22, we had a draft text that we took to the Planning Commission, worked on it with them, had some workshops, worked with the LELU, which is the Legislative and Land Use Subcommittee, and actually began the public process in October of '22. So that's where we reached out to other agencies, internal and external. We reached out to developers, and we wanted to make it a very collaborative process because we were very aware that this is going to affect the development in our community as a whole. So we did start that process back then, and we've been very intentional about including others in the conversation. And so now it's before you guys for adoption. So again, kind of walking you through this whole process, essentially what started with the idea of open space is just the need for, first of all, environmental conservation. I think that Johnson City has some amazing natural resources and opportunities for protection. So kind of looking at that and thinking about that. And also kind of the other end of the spectrum, but creating spaces for communities to gather. So more structured space that communities can share, people can come, talk to their neighbors. I know throughout COVID, we all realized how important those outdoor spaces were. And so kind of taking all of these together and some other concerns with density and Johnson City's growth. And as we continue to see, more people come here and more development, just ensuring that we are intentional about creating those spaces. So all of these ideas kind of led to the idea of going forward with open space. And I'm not going to read this, but there's plenty of documentation and research that shows the values of urban green space and what all it means to the economy, the environment, socially, and even to people's health. So that's where we got our purpose and intent statement. And essentially the idea is that we wanted to create an ordinance that utilized open space in the context of its surroundings. So an ordinance that focused on both conservation and creating spaces for people to gather, depending on the context of the development. I also want to take a second to clarify that this open space ordinance that you all are considering tonight is only applicable to single-family developments, detached single-family developments. When we actually first started the process, the open space ordinance did include both commercial and multifamily as well. But in the development of the ordinance, we've gotten to a point where we feel as though single family is ready for you all to consider, and commercial and multifamily still needs a little bit more working through and more workshops with the Planning Commission to kind of nail down exactly what those ordinances are going to be. So that's not to say that those will not come forward, just in front of you tonight is single family only. So kind of going off of that,
There it is.
this is a little bit, and it's actually in the wrong place, sorry. But this is a policy breakdown. So in front of you guys, you see that it started at December 13th, actually was the first time it was considered by Planning Commission. They sent it back to workshop. They had 2 workshops on it, actually. And so they just heard it last month, and so now it's here for you guys for 3 readings. And I kind of broke it down just so you can see. We do have a workshop scheduled in April for the multifamily and commercial open space standards. So again, I just want to clarify, we are planning on working on those and bringing those forward. We just didn't want to hold up single family as we proceeded to work forward on those. So a little bit about the applicability. As you can see, I have a couple other cities up there. We studied a bunch of different cities. I just went ahead and put these up here because I thought that they were good comparisons. But what we're proposing is that all single-family development greater than 25 dwelling units or greater than 10 acres and where new roads are a requirement. So we really just wanted to make sure that this didn't have a negative impact on infill. So there's lots of smaller pieces of land throughout the city where you see sometimes people put 4 or 5 houses. We didn't want them to have to abide by the open space standards. So this is just to kind of ensure that it's those larger developments that have the opportunity to create those spaces. We're suggesting a 15% required percentage. And the reason why we are doing that is because that's actually what is already in our RP districts. So as our zoning code exists, we do have a 15% requirement in the RP districts. The difference is that there's really no rules on what that has to be. So what we've noticed to date is that a lot of time that land just becomes unused land behind houses, it's inaccessible, and the community can't really enjoy it. So although it's 15% that is existing in our zoning code, it's not going to have that same set of standards. We're going to add these new open space standards. But we thought that because 15% already exists, it was a great idea to take that and piggyback off of that. Additionally, it is similar to other jurisdictions. Staff and Planning Commission did extensive research about where other places are, conserving and what their percentages are, and everybody felt that 15% was in line with what other jurisdictions are doing. So to kind of give you an idea of what that 15% looks like, this is a development. It is actually not in Johnson City, but you can see that you've got 36 single-family lots, no open space standards. When you apply open space standards, you now have 31 single-family lots. So you do lose 5 of those lots, but you see you've got these lots right here, these lots right here, and these lots right here, designated as open space. So again, this is just kind of for you guys to see a comparison of how this actually does impact development. So now I'm going to get into a little bit of the body of our open space ordinance. We are breaking it down so that half, or at least half, of the required 15% has to be considered active open space. Now, active open space is essentially just any improved upon areas. So that can be a community pool, it can be a playground, it can be a walking trail, something like that. Whereas passive open space is something that is ecologically valuable, something that's worth conserving. It can be a land with easements, it can be a field, it can be, again, a forested area. And so that's kind of where we're going with the distinction between active and passive. So to give you a little bit more of an idea, this would be considered passive open space. Don't get distracted by the incredibly cute dog on the screen.
Is that your dog?
That is my dog. So this is what would be considered a passive open space. On the previous slide, it did say stormwater. So in this ordinance, staff is including stormwater, as you can see this right here, to count as a passive space. And there's a couple reasons behind that. The first being is it can actually be ecologically valuable. There are some benefits to stormwater devices. And additionally, since we're imposing this as a new development standard, we kind of wanted to do a little bit of a carrot approach. So yes, you have to have 15% open space, but your stormwater that you have to do can count too for a piece of it. So it's kind of like a bonus. But you can see you can use these spaces just like this. And then again, on the flip side, you have active spaces. So what we're really looking for is the development to utilize the open space and activate it. And this is really focused more on community gathering points and things like that. And we have 2 amazing examples in our downtown where they've actually activated stormwater devices. We also have standards for our trails. So if you want a walking trail to count as your active open space, you would have to construct it to one of these standards. There's also been a lot of talk about a greenway plan in the Parks and Rec Department, and Planning Commission wanted to make sure that as that plan comes along, the open space ordinance and the greenway plan work together. So there is a clause in there that says that this open space ordinance will have to comply with any applicable plans. And as the greenway plan is potentially developed and adopted, we might go back and make amendments to the open space so that they can better work together. There are a couple reductions and exceptions. Essentially, if the city wants to construct a park, then the Parks and Rec Director has the ability to work with the property owner that may end up in a reduction of open space percentage requirement. If you're within a quarter mile from an existing park, you can potentially receive up to a 25% reduction. And the logic there is just that you have access to existing amenities that your residents could potentially walk to. And then if you have 30,000 plus square foot lots, or agricultural uses. As far as access goes, you have to have at least 10 feet of access along a public street, or you can have 10 feet of access along a private street, but that has to come with the developer or the Director of Development Services approval. These are the couple changes to the code. It was in your packet. It's really mostly just clerical errors or clerical changes and then adding in open space. I will also note that we are changing the RP districts so that for single-family developments in RP districts, they would have to abide by these open space standards as opposed to the existing open space standards. However, if a multifamily development came in right now and came in as RP, they would still have to abide by just the regular RP districts. They wouldn't be subject to the single-family standards.
Go back to the last one. The one before that one.
One more.
No, this one's there. You went too far.
Sorry.
If the city wants to construct a park, is that supposed to be within a quarter mile?
No, so
Is that a reduction or an exception for if the city wants to construct a park?
it could potentially be a reduction.
Okay.
So the idea is if it's land that the city wants for some reason to construct a park and the Parks and Rec director wants that to be used for a public space, if it doesn't meet 15%, if the developer is willing to work with the city, that could potentially result in a reduction. But that would have to be initiated by the city and Parks and Rec.
In quarter mile versus half mile?
The idea was just walking distance.
Okay, thank you.
So I do want to disclose a little bit of the last couple workshops. I know I mentioned the timeline a bit earlier about what happened in these workshops. And so the Planning Commission wanted to meet to discuss a couple things. They wanted to discuss a minimum contiguous requirement, and they also wanted to discuss the 15% that was proposed. So with the minimum contiguous requirement, this ordinance had actually initially proposed a minimum contiguous size. However, after discussion with the Planning Commission, we'd actually removed that and taken that out. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But then we also discussed the 15%. And there was a lot of conversation about, is 15% enough? We really value open space, we really value community gathering spaces, we really value our natural resources. And so the conversation that was held at these workshops really centered around development and affordability. And so as you can see in this scale, there was some concern that maybe the more that we add these development regulations, you start to lose the affordability. So we just adopted some changes in the fire code that forces developers to use a little bit more pavement and takes up a little bit more of their land. Then you also have other zoning standards with setbacks and everything going on, and then open space. And all of these things add cost. So you have a scale that starts to tip the more you add and the more regulations you impose. And so what happened in the workshop is we actually decided to remove that contiguous open space standard. One, just in an effort to, again, allow design flexibility and creativity to the developer. And then also we decided to stick with the 15% as opposed to going to 20 or considering even 25. And the idea was looking through this and looking through the ordinance that we have, both the Planning Commission and staff felt like it really balanced both quality development but also affordability. Because we do want to be intentional with our design and intentional with our open space standards, but we don't want it to come at such a cost that we lose affordable housing. So staff is recommending approval. The Planning Commission also recommended approval unanimously at the last meeting. This is first reading, so we still have 2 more readings to go, and our public hearing will be at the next reading. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Did you look back at our existing neighborhoods, not that they have to comply, but just to see what kind of percentages they had and some of the things that have already been developed?
We looked at a lot of different developments within the city, and as they've come in, we've sort of taken those into consideration. We also looked at some developments in the county. We looked at different developments in the existing RP districts that already had the 15%, and again, how that was kind of utilized. So yes, we looked extensively at all sorts of developments.
So do most of them kind of fit in this already that we have, or are there a bunch that don't, or do we know?
It really is very site sensitive. Johnson City is really unique in its topography challenges. And so, there are some sites that have a ton of open space because they really didn't have a choice. They couldn't build on it.
Yeah.
And then there are also some that have absolutely none.
Yeah.
So it really is site specific.
Okay.
Peyton, you said you talked with several stakeholder groups. What about the builders? What was their feedback?
Initially, they said, wow, we have a lot of changes. And so we sat down and we worked with them, and they actually were invited to the Planning Commission workshops, and they sat at the table with us and helped us through and showed us some developments that they've done outside of this area. And it was a very, very collaborative process. And I feel like by the end, and I don't want to speak for any of them, and I don't even know if anyone who is there is here right now. But I feel like at the end of the process, they were comfortable with the document that we had proposed going forward.
I guess my question is in regards to once the development's done, especially the active open space, whose responsibility is that? Whether it's a playground for replacement or maintenance and whatnot, is this open space that's going to be assigned to the city, or is there going to be, does this force developments to create HOAs in order to maintain these requirements?
It would likely be maintained by an HOA. The city would not be on the hook for any open space. And the city, if they wanted to, kind of like the public parks clause, they could potentially take that on. But the city would have to initiate that, and that wouldn't be, something that would be a developer request. But it would more than likely be an HOA. There is a clause in there that says that a potential land trust, if you were looking at more of the conservation side of things, you could donate that land to a land trust. But yes, it would not be up to the city to maintain.
I guess because I worry about, like, with neighborhood buffer requirements and whatnot, how are we going to maintain these in the requirements, 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road? What's the mechanism that we would have? Is there something that we need to look at in codes in order to, or is it already covered in codes?
Once the open space is created, it would be subject to any codes that we have existing. So maintenance and continuation and upkeep of those open spaces would be subject to the codes as they are, just like any other development.
And I'm assuming the enforcement letter would go to the HOA or
Correct.
even to the adjoining property owners or something if it came to that. It'd be like keeping the right-of-way in front of your house cleared.
Anything else?
So with the open space, so the open space is that, who would, own it? Say they don't do an HOA, or I guess you're saying that this would, in effect, force an HOA to be created.
It could potentially. It would be up to the developer to determine how the land is managed.
But if it wasn't, I think what you're saying then, who would own the green space?
Who would pay the property tax?
An HOA.
Well, or I think they could assign it to a lot and have it part of that ownership of that lot, that it would still be qualified as the open space, right? And it would be restricted, that they couldn't build on it or
Somebody would have to
minimize any
maintain
of
it
the
to
open space.
mow it.
I think that's a consideration
Yes.
that needs to be explored, because there may be some developments that would come up that would meet that minimum standard that you're talking about that would not have an HOA or something, and probably not be practical to have an HOA. So it would have to be something else in there that adjoining property owner would own it or something like that, so that it just wouldn't be out in space type property.
It can be maintained by a private entity.
And a lot of this, I think, we're dealing with annexation by request of county property not currently in the city. There's a lot of developments going on in the county that obviously are staying in the county, not coming into the city. Does the county currently have these types, open space requirements?
No, sir.
Okay, so in effect, to stay more open space, it would probably be better to annex into the city going forward, if you're in the county area, and there's going to be development.
Anything else? Do I have
Thanks
a
for all the
motion?
work y'all done on this.
Thank
for
you.
sure.
It's amazing. Thank you.
I'll move for approval.
Have a
Second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor, your next order of business is ordinance 4841-23 on first reading. An ordinance assigning the R2B low-density residential zoning district to an approximately 115-acre territory located north of Ford Creek, an RP3 planned residential district to an approximately 20-acre territory south of Ford Creek associated with the voluntary Keebler annexation. And Ms. Payton is up again.
Good evening again. Y'all are going to get sick of hearing my voice on this one. So I'm going to do my best to explain this because this is really complicated. So please, if you have any questions, chime in. So First, I'm going to start with talking about the process. And so that's where we are, the timelines, all of that. Then I'm going to talk about the actual initial zoning assignment. That's the request before you tonight. So I'll give you that and then talk about the land use analysis. And then I'm going to talk about next steps. So what would happen after potential annexation. And then I'm just going to kind of tie it all together with the plan of services and the annexation itself. So the process. The Keebler development came before you all with a zoning assignment request for the Rural Neighborhood Zoning District. The Rural Neighborhood Zoning District is no longer under consideration. With that, we can't assign a zoning district that doesn't exist. So what happened is, you all heard the annexation. It went to the Planning Commission recommendation, went through its preliminary resolution, and it actually had its final resolution, which you all deferred. In addition to the annexation, there's also a separate but concurrent zoning assignment running along with it. And so the annexation is the actual physical expansion of the city limits. It's taking land in. The zoning assignment is the land use, the zoning, and what goes on it. And they are two separate things throughout the process. So what happened as the annexation was going along is the zoning assignment of RN was going along. So it went to Planning Commission, had its recommendation. It came to you all for first reading, came to you all for second reading, but it did not make third reading because we pulled the new zoning district. And so it couldn't be heard because you can't, again, assign a zoning district that doesn't exist. So what happened is that zoning assignment and that ordinance died. Doesn't exist. But the annexation is still where it was because that doesn't impact the annexation. So the annexation still went through. So again, it's still hanging out on its final resolution that you all deferred to May 4th. So that brings me to our policy steps and timeline. So July 21st of 2022, you all approved a request to proceed. On March 14th, it went to the Planning Commission for its zoning assignment. And now on April 6th, which is tonight, you guys are hearing the first reading of the zoning assignment. Typically with an annexation, you would also hear the preliminary resolution, but you're not hearing that tonight because it already happened. And then on April 20th, you'll have the second reading of the zoning assignment. There won't be a public hearing. And then on May 4th, the zoning assignment will catch up with the final resolution. So that would be your quote-unquote final action night. And that would be when you hear or have the public hearing. So that's where we are and how we got here. So I'm going to talk about the request in front of you, which is the initial zoning assignment request. The request is for R2B and RP3. So R2B is this large portion in the back, and RP3 is this smaller portion along the front. And so the R2B is the single-family portion. The RP3 is the multifamily portion. With this zoning assignment, there is no binding concept plan. Not for the RP district, not for the R2B. None of it is binding. It would just be the zoning districts, and they would have all the entitlements of those zoning districts. Now, staff is recommending approval because the way the site is laid out, the RP3 that they have is along larger roads. So it has frontage on Suncrest. It's kind of out towards the roads, and so it's appropriate to have a higher density in that area. And so the RP3 is actually perfectly appropriate for that sliver. Now, as you go back and you get closer to other neighborhoods and you abut a school, single family is more appropriate for that location. So that's why staff is recommending approval of the single family portion on the back side, and then the RP3 multifamily portion on the front side. Taking a step back and just considering land use, single family is appropriate back here, and multifamily is appropriate along your larger roads. And the future land use map is essentially saying that. I know it's a little odd to see, but it basically says that you need to have commercial up along Suncrest. And while they're proposing townhomes and not commercial, really the idea behind the future land use map is that you want your higher intensity uses closer to the street and your lower intensity single family back behind you. Okay, so that is their request in front of you today, is the R2B and the RP3 with no concept plan. Now, in an effort to be completely transparent, the applicant plans to request a rezoning upon annexation into the city. The reason why is because once they come into the city and they request a rezoning, they are subject to binding concept plans. So what that means is this concept plan that you have in front of you, that would be their request, would be binding. They would be subject to develop according to that concept plan, and if they wanted to change it, they would have to come to you to request a variance from that. So what you can see is it's 362 single-family lots, 126 townhomes, and they're various sizes. I know that you all heard lot averaging at last meeting, and you'll hear it again in a second. But they actually do use lot averaging here. And so you can see that they have a variety of different lot sizes. And this concept plan, again, would have to be something that came to you in the context of a rezoning. So we could talk all about the concept plan. But one thing that I do want to point out is that because they're requesting RP3 along the road on the other side of the creek, these townhomes, that would not be subject to the concept plan because they're just requesting that district as is. However, staff isn't concerned because, again, multifamily and that zoning district is appropriate along that side. Once they request an RP rezoning on this backside, and the reason why staff would not recommend approval of just requesting it right now, and they have to pursue this rezoning, is because without a binding concept plan, the RP district allows density that staff would not be comfortable recommending approval of. So RP could be useful on this site, and it could be appropriate, but all of the entitlements of the RP district is not appropriate. So that appropriateness would come with that binding concept plan. So that's why they have the desire to come in and request a rezoning. And at this point, the conversation really only revolves around land use, which again, single family is appropriate, but the RP allows multifamily. When it comes in for a rezoning, you can focus in that conversation on the actual concept plan and what that looks like, and the density and those sorts of things. So once that happens, that would be the rezoning policy steps and timeline. It would start at Planning Commission and again go to you guys for 3 readings. Just like a normal rezoning, you would have your public hearing on the 2nd reading, and you guys would get to see this item again. So just to kind of tie it all together, I'm going to mention the plan of services for a second because that was really associated with the annexation itself and the preliminary and final resolutions. But the zoning assignment does work with the plan of services, and so the actual plan of services hasn't changed because the plan of services is based on the development and what the developer proposes to build and what they can serve and what we can do. And so even with the zoning assignment request, if they didn't come back for a new rezoning and they built out at the full entitlements of the R2B and the RP3, the plan of services would still stand and we would still be able to serve as it is. Here are a couple
Can I
photos
ask
of the
a
site.
question?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you go back. The delay in sewer availability, what was the timing on that?
It was 5 years.
5 years.
And that's we can meet capacity of about 200 homes, but then we have to go downstream to develop some more upgrades.
So staff and planning commission did recommend approval of this zoning assignment, and it was a unanimous recommendation. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have because that was a lot of information that I just threw at you guys.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
I'm not confused at all.
That was the goal.
It says a lot.
Any questions, comments, or motions?
And because we approved this ties also with the readings of the, or we just open space. So this will apply to this project as well, if they all pass.
Correct, yes. Assuming that everything goes through on the schedule as it's proposed, if you chose to pass both of those items on their final reading, this development would be subject to open space standards.
Yeah. And I think from what I remember, that is at about 24% open space or something like that.
Yes, they're
so-
actually going above the requirement.
Yeah.
If there's not any other comments, I'll move approval. approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Laps?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Your next order of business is ordinance number 4843-23 on first reading. An ordinance to amend Title 8, Chapter 1 of the Code of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee. Ms. Sandos is coming to present that.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor, Mayor, Commissioners. You'll recall a few years ago whenever we revised Title VIII to include the replatting of Freedom Hall. So we come to you again today with another revision that deals with that Civic Center property. Whenever the Civic Center was initially included into Title VIII, the original language had included just the premises of the building itself. What this revision does is it expands outside of the physical building. With this, we've included the language that will say in the identified beer permitted areas, which are in or around the Civic Center, there's still going to be the 100 feet barriers that have to be in place between any school property, playground property, and where the beer permitted area is going to be. But this expands so that there can be beer located outside the physical walls of the building.
How will those areas be designated and supervised?
Similar to our special events that we have in the downtown areas. Whenever those events are going to take place that have beer outside of the walls, that'll go through our special events coordinator as well as Mark Stone to make sure that there are properly identified barriers and perimeters in place. Typically, you're going to see those with some of that public works netting that's in place. It might be
Yellow.
Right, but there'll be physical barriers that are easily identifiable.
Are there some events that we would not want to be serving beer outside, or, Mr. Stone, how are you going to designate, and what kind of events are we talking about that would?
Well, we're talking about the 4th of July. We wound up having the beer garden inside, and it was not well received and not well attended, so we wanted to get it outside for the public and so that they could see the fireworks from outside and not have to be inside. It will open up opportunities for us to do a concert or two on that parking lot A and have a few events out there. So it's still a limited scope. I don't think we're going to encroach upon the school that much.
We won't encroach upon the school at all.
I was getting ready.
No, we will be complying with all the other requirements of Title VIII with regard to those distance requirements.
This will be after any school hours anyway, correct?
Typically, yes. Again, I'll let Mr. Stone talk to that.
Yeah, it would be. That is correct.
Have we informed the schools that this is on our agenda?
I don't believe that there was any communication to them since the impact to the schools should be at a very minimal to low level.
Was there input from the police department on this request?
No.
Is there a time limit we're trying to get within on this particular item?
The first event that this would be able to impact would be the 4th of July event.
I'd be more comfortable to defer this so we can talk with the police and make sure the schools are aware.
Okay.
Before I vote on it anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
So I have a motion to defer.
I will move to defer.
Second. And I have a second to defer. What else do we need to do, Mr. Trivett or Ms. Laus?
You just need to vote. It does not have to be deferred to a specific date. It can just be deferred till the next meeting.
That is correct.
Yeah,
And you just need to-
you'll have a chance to talk with those folks that we brought up.
And so you've instructed staff, we've taken notes, we'll know what you want us to do, so you just need to vote on that deferral.
Deferral.
Move
All
on.
right. Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Your next order of business is ordinance number 4838-23 on second reading. An ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2023 budget passed by ordinance 4812-22. Mr. Dustin Thompson is here to answer any questions.
I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, we recommend approval on second reading.
Nothing has changed about it,
Nothing
right?
has changed on it.
No public hearing on it?
We had public hearing on first reading.
I wasn't here.
Sorry.
Yeah, you missed that.
Missed the public hearing.
Anybody say anything good?
Any further discussion,
Nobody was.
anything? Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Thank you, Dustin. Your next order of business is ordinance 4840-23, second reading and public hearing. An ordinance proposing text changes to Article 2, definition of terms used in the code, and Article 4, application of regulations of the zoning code of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee. Ms. Amber is here to answer any questions and to do a presentation, if anything has changed.
Yeah, has anything changed on this since we,
There have been no changes, but today is the public hearing.
okay,
Should I proceed?
just maybe a,
Quick overview?
just a quick overview?
Real quick.
Yeah, without going through all this.
Just a lot averaging, so.
So basically, what lot area averaging would do it would be applied to the detached single-family districts in our zoning code. And this is how the lot sizes would end up looking. This is an example neighborhood in the picture, and a comparison of that example neighborhood to our districts. And again, this example is a lot more intense than what any of our districts would ever allow, but it still is a really nice neighborhood. Lot area averaging would not allow higher density than would otherwise be allowed by a district. It wouldn't allow the lots to be more narrow. It wouldn't let the setbacks be reduced or encourage any more variance requests. The actual text change, the features are it would reduce grading and vegetation removal and help developments to fit more naturally into the surrounding landscape. We have a lot of policies that support this sort of text change. And staff recommends approval, as did the Planning Commission.
Could you just go back to the slide, other cities who have done this?
Yeah, I couldn't find something that was very similar to what we're proposing in Tennessee, but in other states, there's something very similar.
Thank you.
Nothing right now. I will go to the public hearing, and I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak, if you come forward to the microphone. Seeing none? Or- Seeing one? Can you state your name?
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, my name is Danny Sells. I live on Delmer Salts Road and adjoin the Keebler property in Gray Station,
How do you spell your last name?
Sells. It's been a tough week, somewhat troubling and in all respects quite sad. Whether it's from New York or whether it's from Nashville, it's been tough. But one of the things that I'm encouraged by is what's going on here. I think in Johnson City, and I think this resolution is, or this ordinance change is one that helps us with it. With looking at some things that I think we've needed to look at between the city and the county for a long time. I sincerely appreciate the commission's realization in December that you weren't quite ready to move forward with this. Some things didn't make sense. And that actually gave us the opportunity to look at this particular piece. I think there are some needs as we go on down the road with this and open space to look at some requirements. Options are options, and our children given the option to brush their teeth before they go to bed probably don't. And so, same way with developers, if you really want these things to work, then there has to be some point that you say there are some expectations. It isn't just this, and are things that make sense for the public and what you're trying to do. I think that things such as this and us continuing to work as we go through the other pieces of open space, it may not be inappropriate to say that it bends the arc toward justice, but at least bends the arc toward letting the communities know what it is happening and what is going to occur, and how the city and the county at some point in our life might work together to help us really understand how this area is growing. So I appreciate this. I think that lot averaging makes a lot of sense. Naturally, the Keebler property is what's most forward in my mind, but I think it works in a lot of places. As been mentioned, the topography here in the area is quite difficult. Giving the opportunity to vary those lot sizes, to vary the type houses, to vary the price range in houses, those are some of the things that I think we ought to be looking at, some requirements or how that's put together and how the staff can work and make that happen, but also making it contour with the landscape much better to be more pleasing to the eye. I still don't like this size of development and compact development in the Gray Station area. I think it's way out of place relative to where we're going. But at least we're beginning to make some opportunity or some progress in discussing what some of the things are. So I appreciate this, and I do support this, and hopefully as we move on through the other things that we can see how they can provide some benefit. One of the things I don't quite understand, and I could talk to Peyton afterwards, but I don't understand why on the zoning we are not doing the open or public comments in 2 weeks. Is there some requirement that you have the zoning assignment and the annexation at the same meeting? That confused me because normally it happens in the second reading. But that's the only question I would have. But I appreciate what y'all have done thus far. I'm moderately encouraged, and I hope to see more progress made, and I hope that our people in the county and the city too can start coming out and being more part of these meetings. I really appreciate the Planning Commission and their willingness to make us a part of it and listen to some of the things that we had to say. I think it's really improved the process, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sells.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
Anyone else? All right, I will close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Laus.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Mayor, your next order of business is 9.1, the Holy Taco annexation, final resolution and public hearing. The final resolution calling for the owner requested annexation and adoption of the associated plan of services for approximately 1.75 acres located at 4903 North Rome Street, also known as the Holy Taco annexation.
Any changes?
There are no changes.
Good.
Tonight is public hearing.
We have to have public hearing.
Yep.
So if there are no comments right now, I will open the public hearing. Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public hearing.
Move approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Laus.
Commissioner Brock?
Well, I can still breathe, yes. I'm sorry, I'm having this gigantic allergy
thing.
attack.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes. Do you want to stay? Do more?
There's
The
another
next-
one.
The next order of business is ordinance number 4835-23, third reading and public hearing. An ordinance requesting the B4 Planned Arterial Business Zoning District to an approximately 1.75 acre territory located at 4903 North Rome Street, associated with the voluntary Holy Taco annexation.
So you guys just annexed it. I would recommend you zone it.
So moved.
We have
Well,
to have
public
public
hearing.
hearing,
Oh,
so
sorry.
thank you. But I will, again, open the public hearing.
They here?
Anyone here? Holy Taco people? Anybody?
I was hoping they'd bring us some tacos.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Next week.
All right. Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public hearing, and I will go back to.
So moved.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Laps?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome to the city.
Welcome, Holy Taco, to the city of Johnson City.
Number 3.
Right,
three.
number 3.
Mayor, that was the last order of business on the agenda.
All right. Start over here. Mr. Hunter, anything this evening before we adjourn?
Nothing of note. Happy Easter, everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would just like to say that this past Monday morning, John was a part of the team that pulled the Johnson City Prayer Breakfast together, and it was just an amazing morning. It was so good. I think about 250 people were there, and it taught us a lot of wonderful lessons.
Absolutely.
And I think the theme of it was we just need to love each other more. So I appreciate the organizers of that, and they really prayed for our city, for our city leaders, for our citizens, our children, and families, and it was just a good morning.
Agree. Vice Mayor?
I would like to mention that the ETSU Marching Band was one of 3 university bands invited to march at Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. And we're really excited about that opportunity for one of our local universities. But most importantly, I would like to mention how excited I am as a local leader in celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. What more excitement would I have regarding anything in this lifetime? So, happy Resurrection Day to all the citizens of Johnson City, Tennessee.
Thank you. And I got to participate in the prayer breakfast on Monday and was honored to get to pray for our first responders at that. So it was moving for me to be there, and it was like being in church. So it was a great morning. So I appreciated the invitation to be there and speak. So if nothing else, I want to wish everyone a happy Easter, and
Easter.
go watch the replay of the Masters tonight that we've missed while we've been here all day. And
Same
with
here.
that, I will adjourn the meeting.
Have a great
Sorry, guys, man.
Thank you all.
You went up.